Good afternoon and aloha, everybody. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, and I'm joining you from Livestream.travel and World Tourism Network in Honolulu, Hawaii. Today is Friday, January 22nd, and this is our second brainstorming session for the World Tourism Network Aviation Interest Group. World Tourism Network was founded just recently in response to the rebuilding.travel conversation that had been going on since March, since ITB Berlin did not take place. And World Tourism Network started off with a variety of events in December. They're all archived. You can simply go to livestream.travel, go back and you find it, or you can go to World Tourism Expo.travel and you also find our events. The Aviation Interest Group is under the leadership of Vijay, and I'm not, he told me a minute ago how to pronounce his last name. I'm going to call him Vijay and he can tell me himself. But Vijay is an expert in the travel and tourism industry. He's joining us from Singapore. I know him when he first was the VP for Etihad Airways in Abu Dhabi, and he's leading this group. Anyone who wants to join and join this group and join World Tourism Network, you can simply do this and go to wtn.travel and click on join, and we would welcome you to our group. There are many other interest groups besides aviation you find, and there are also chapters around the world. And if you are a member and you're interested in adding an interest group or a chapter, you can also do this. And we're making this very interactive. It's an organization from the bottom up, with right now with members in 125 countries. Now, this was enough advertising for WTN. So I wanted to welcome Vijay in Singapore, and he will take the lead from here.
Thank you very much, Jürgen, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to this brainstorming session on the activities of the Aviation Interest Group of the World Tourism Network, which I have the honor to serve as chairman. Delighted to see so many old and dear friends on this call, and to be meeting new friends and colleagues as we discuss a sector which is clearly very, very dear to our hearts. The aviation sector, I know, in which each one of you have been involved with, are still involved with, hence your participation in this call. And my name is Vijay Poonoosamy. I'm from Mauritius, but now based in Singapore. And I have the honor to serve as the chairman of this group. So for the next hour and a half, I would suggest we basically hopefully keep our videos on and microphones off, and delve into a very open-ended and inclusive discussion, which I would hope to be candid as well. The Aviation Interest Group, as Jürgen mentioned, was created in December last year to provide a safe and inclusive space for travel and tourism stakeholders to have candid discussions about the formidable aviation challenges we're currently facing, and in a way to try to influence through discussions, through suggestions, through brainstorming, the rebuilding of confidence in the trustworthiness, the safety, the security, the predictability, and positive community value of travel and tourism. Our first event was on 17th December, when we had the inaugural series of panel discussions entitled Plane Talk, which we hope to continue hopefully on a monthly basis this year. In this session, I invite you to basically make some suggestions to all of us on two matters. The first one, what specific topics do you suggest that this group should be addressing going forward? And then if you can throw in there, how do you think would be the best and more effective way for us to address these topics? Whether it's through a series of plain talk panels, whether it's through documents, through the website, through other activities, please, we are all ears in terms of your suggestions. But firstly, in the context of which topics do you think we should be discussing? So the floor is open. All you need to do is raise your hands either by going to the chat button, the reaction button, reaction at the bottom of your screen, and raise the raise hand, or just physically raise your hands. Or you can also type in your suggestions in the chat at the bottom of your screen, and I will put my email address there, so you can also now or later send me any of your thoughts as well. So please just feel free to.
And Vijay, just for your information, you are now a co-host, and you can see in the share screen that Katonga, for instance, right now is raising his hand. And yeah, the chat group is great, but please also keep in mind we are live on eTurbo News and on many other platforms right now. So we have way more people seeing us from the outside in the future, and they cannot see the chat group. So it's always good if you really actually ask the question. Makes it more personal as well.
Please.
I think Katongo, right? Go ahead.
Katongo, please. Go ahead.
Unmute yourself, yes.
Good morning and good evening. Here in Zambia, it's early morning at 3 o'clock. And I'm sure in Hawaii, it's around late afternoon or morning. I want to thank you so much for according me this opportunity. Among the topics that I would suggest we discuss, since I'm especially Jagen knows that I'm specifically based in an airline. Currently, I work for ProFlight Zambia. It's a local airline for Zambia. I'm in flight operations as a flight operations assistant. I've been with the airline for 10 years. Yeah, 10 years. So maybe one of the suggestions is to advise airlines to have a manual on communicable diseases. We have, most of the airlines do have manuals, emergency response, safety management system, AVSEC, but now with this COVID thing that has come on COVID, it's imperative that airline also do create a manual on how to tackle the communicable diseases, so that and should be regulated by IATA, ICAO. It should be a part of a doc. That includes also ICAO to create the manual for the communicable disease. That just like any other manuals, each airlines, they do have manuals, about 20 manuals or so. So we can also add that one as part of a topic to discuss about it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's actually good to remind everybody that even in the Chicago Convention, which is the foundation document for international civil aviation since 1944, Article 14 is about prevention of spread of disease, which actually gives each contracting state the undertaking to take effective measures to prevent the spread by means of air navigation of communicable diseases. Any other thoughts, please? Just raise your hands and unmute yourself. Diana, please. Just unmute your.
Yes, I just typed it there, but my biggest passion is that we have a tendency not to pay attention to the communities around the hotels and so on. And so we're focusing on empowering communities with entrepreneurship training to enable them to participate in business development within their communities, which should include security and COVID protocols. and then they can be marketed with the tourism products to allow visitors to enjoy the lifestyle of the communities as part of their package. And then they would feel comfortable because they know that they have been trained and they understand that they have to pay attention to the COVID protocol. That's what we're doing now in Jamaica. And it's working very well. Visitors can not just be confined to the hotels, but they can go out and enjoy the culture and the heritage and so on. So that's my input.
Thank you very much, Diana. You actually raise an interesting point because, especially in this context now, where the sector is so dependent on basically government support, and it's clear that communities have more influence on government's reactions than any particular business sector. And I think the more this sector can do to demonstrate, amplify its importance, not just as a business, but for communities and stakeholders, I think the better chances it has of getting a better hearing and a better interaction with governments. It's a very good point, Diana. Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Well, we have, I think, Eleanor, you had some really important points in regards to aviation before, so don't be shy. You're muted. You're still muted.
Yeah, I have a lot of issues with the industry in general. And as you're discussing the industry at any part of it, what is seriously absent is any leadership. There is not one major or even minor airline where the CEO or the chairperson of the board has raised his or her hand and spoken with any authority about ways and means that we're going to be coping with 2021 and how we're going to move forward in 2022 without killing people. So there's very, very, very sluggish attempt to introduce some UV lights in order to kill the virus. There's one, I think it's Stelzer is bringing in some new light, new ultraviolets to kill some germs in the bathrooms. But instead they continue to show these poor people clad with masks and gowns, spraying these horrible chemicals all throughout the plane every, 6 or 12 hours. Which are I'm sure, a danger not only to the person who's spraying the mist, but lingers to kill the passengers. So the HVA system is still not being addressed. The middle seat issue is still not being addressed. Seat size is still not being addressed. Antimicrobial materials in which the interior of the plane is constructed is not being addressed. A few airlines have addressed the uniforms for the airline personnel to keep a form of PPE to keep them safe. But other airlines are still showing dancing airline personnel and singing songs as though that's really important. And nobody of authority, of experience, of expertise is taken their arms around the issue and addressed it as a really serious problem. And it's not until we have new people in the White House in Washington that our country is even taken this seriously. So except for the doctors and the other people in healthcare, this is still, for now over a year, been taken like something was going to just roll over like a mist. So I keep looking for leadership. I'm having a few interviews come up on my Zoom meetings for ETN that will start looking at what new leaders need, how the universities are going to be able to adapt or adjust to this new skill set that leaderships need, because anybody that's in the industry right now are not role models. There's not one man or woman in the entire industry, in the entire planet, that I would consider a role model on the industry. So yes, I write about it. I talk about it. People give me likes from here to wherever in the world, and then no one steps up and starts having a dialogue. So everybody's just hiding in the woodwork, waiting for somebody to take charge. Nobody takes charge. We're a
Thank you
leader.
very much. Thank you very much. I think you make a very good point, which is probably worth discussing. Actually, two good points I'd like to follow up on right now. One is clearly during a global crisis of confidence, and we are really in one right now, businesses and public and private international organizations involved in travel and tourism must go out of their way to demonstrate their trustworthiness, their relevance, and not their vested interests. That's one point. The second point I pick up from what you're saying, is that we must wake up to the new normal. The world has changed, and the business models we basically embraced up to 2019 need to be revisited, and we need to demonstrate how we are basically pivoting to be able to adapt, adjust, and thrive in a new environment. Unless we demonstrate that, again, our credibility as a sector is going to be doubted. But these are very good points, So anybody else would like to? Yeah.
The research shows that the customer, the potential customer, yes, granted, there's an enormous of pent-up demand, and there's going to be a lot of money flooding into our business communities as soon as people are vaccinated and there's not a fear of talking to your neighbor. But all the research shows that at this moment and for the foreseeable future, what people are concerned with is safety, sanitation. And what the airlines continue to promote, and not just the airlines, but the entire industry continues to think they're promoting 2019. We do not care whether your airline personnel can sing and dance. We don't want to see waiters that are twirling their trays. What we want to see is distance and masks and robots and distancing, and that is not a part of the litany or the guidebooks or the portfolios of any part of the industry. Everybody thinks it's still 2019 in the industry, and the consumer knows it's not, and they're not going to move rapidly or in any large size numbers to support the industry until their message is heard. And any good researcher that you read online or anywhere else, the research is really clear and very consistent. And it's been totally ignored by the people that are in the industry. And I'm not going to use the word leadership because there are no leaders.
Thank you very much, Pierre.
Thank you, Vijay. Just like Jürgen at the beginning, he said, I hope this doesn't sound too much like a commercial, and I'll have to apologize in advance if it does. But I think a very relevant thing I need to mention is that I'm from Montreal. I'm with an organization called Aviation Strategies International. I'm the president, but we also have an institute that does research and publications. In June of 2019, we published a book called Global Megatrends and Aviation, subtitle, The Path to Future-Wise Organizations. So the book addressed 6 megatrends. I don't want to recite them, but it involves geopolitical shifts. It involves the environmental problem that we have worldwide. It involves the acceleration of an introduction of new technologies, changing demographics, and so on. And we discussed, we were 9 authors and from different continents. And we gave examples of what these things, these global megatrends might mean in terms of aviation. Of course, we didn't have we're not pretentious enough to say that we could cover the whole territory. It's very complex. They are very complex topics. But we were very proud of discussing what organizations should do, not to be future ready, but to be future wise, because future ready would be a little bit ambitious. And things like we believe that organizations going forward to face this very turbulent and uncertain future have to be partnership based. Nobody can do it alone. Organizations have to excel in predictive analytics. Organizations have to revamp the way they look at scenario planning, using maybe more modern thinking about it, like the Oxford approach to it. Oxford is the leader in scenario thinking worldwide. So anyways, the point is, following the publication of the book, we interviewed 40 leaders of aviation from around the world, leaders of airlines, airports, DGCAs, ministers, and what have you, to get a little bit their views. And also we ran jointly with the Royal Nautical Society in London in November of 2019, a forum where the idea was to have people try to think about what the future might look like. Anyway, the long story short is we're republishing now, addressing a little bit more in depth pandemic, although we put it under a megatrend called global connectedness. And we also have a chapter now on industry reaction, industry leaders reaction. The point of all this is the future, the intent of the book was to further, if you want, state, like everybody has, that the future is very turbulent, is very uncertain, it's hard to predict, and what have you. And the pandemic just proved that, again, for all of us. So right now, a lot of people, of course, have to focus on recovery from the pandemic. We are, just like some of you have mentioned, and Vijay mentioned, that we're focusing now on what are these new business models that we have to think about, and nobody has the answers yet. And of course, cooperation between aviation and tourism and vice versa is critical. And I think that's one of the areas we should push. I mean, we always talk about this, you know, tourism, aviation, but I think we could be, this forum here, this group could even focus even more on that. And I think that's what probably Vijay had in mind when he agreed to chair it. So anyway, the point is, I think we have to focus on what we're going to do about it. And especially because there are no clear answers. There might be different approaches to it. We're learning about that, but everybody's doing a lot of soul searching. And one thing that's very clear, no airline, no airport, no DGCA can go at it alone. We always have talked about the need for coordination, cooperation between the various elements of the aviation sector and with tourism. Nobody disputed that, but we talked about it more than we actually implemented ways of doing it. But now, no way out other than very strong coordination. So the recovery is right in our face and we cannot ignore it. But I think that we hope that some leading organization, airports, airlines, DGCAs, whatever, will come out and will start modeling what we might have to do for the future. And I'll conclude on one last thing. ICAO does not have a standard for national civil aviation master plans. Some countries have it. ICAO is considering it. But now with this pandemic, the leadership of the ministries, of the DGCAs, to get each country to move forward. What does it mean for infrastructure? What does it mean for strategic thinking? Because the strategic business plan are in the garbage cans. The infrastructure plans are on the back. I'm telling you everything, something that you all know, but I'm saying if we can focus up in part on contributing ideas to what the foundations of some new models could be, and I'm thinking more strategy than necessarily only financial, I think, we will do a real service. It's just an opinion.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Very, very helpful again in terms of reminding us, all of us, that in today's world, more than any other time in history, agility is so critical. The ability for sectors, whether it's governments or private sector, to actually be agile, because we are living in very unprecedented times, and unless we have that mindset of agility and being sensitive to what the future is going to be and how we can influence that future, as opposed to just sitting there waiting for the future to unfold and probably engulf us, as opposed to us riding the waves of the future. Marcelo, please.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you for the invitation as well. I'm Marcelo Garcia. I'm a Senior Director at Intervistas Consulting, previously with Qatar Airways in their International Affairs and Aeropolitical. So quite happy to be here and meet people from all over the world. So in terms of the way forward, I think that the question was that, right? The reason of this webinar. I see there's some kind of 3 layers that we need to kind of push forward. I know that so far in the past year, we've had this very top-down approach where we expect ICAO or IATA or international institutions to bring people together and to show them the way. That's part of the solution, but it's not the whole, I don't think it's the whole package. We've seen in recent months in Europe, but also in North America and currently in Canada, there's a whole debate about it actually becoming with stricter travel restrictions that we already have. So first of all, I think as the aviation tourism industry, we need to accept that global pandemics are highly political by nature, and they attack the very core aspect of why governments exist. I'm talking at a national level, right? What we've seen in the past few months is governments struggling between helping the recovery, helping the relaunch of the tourism industry, yet at the same time, they have some public health imperatives. And oftentimes those public health imperatives don't come from the national government, they actually come from subnational governments. So, and in those governments, some of them are very, either they don't really know about our industry, they don't understand the value of our industry. And so I think that further engagement with subnational governments around the world is one way to move this forward. I think national governments, I mean, they have representatives at ICAO, they probably have observers at IATA, so they are familiar about the value of aviation and the global travel ecosystem. But I think the real problem is engaging with the subnational governments that are actually in charge of health policy. They are the ones telling the national government, hey, we don't want people here. We don't want any more international passengers landing in our airports. So engagement at that level, I think it will help. And then the other aspect as well that I think is could be useful as well as we move forward. I mean, this is the first time that we're facing a global pandemic, right? And we didn't have any data. Like no one had any data on what's the effect of a quarantine? What kind of tests we can implement to make this safer? How can we have better risk management systems, right? So I think that another area that we should focus on is, as an industry, to be the #1 data providers to decision makers, governments, in terms of what happens when you implement testing. Because governments didn't have that data. I mean, we've had conversations with the Canadian government here, and the guys basically starting from zero, right? They have to create the data. There was a lot of forecasting in the early months of the pandemic, but at this point, I don't think that's a trend that I've seen across the regions. I've seen countries open up their borders because they need tourism. So, you know, they'll just open up and see what happens. I've seen very little levels of enforcement in some other regions as well. So I think just to sum up my proposal, I think we need to continue first. We need to continue the engagement to improve the institutional framework that was highly challenged by this global pandemic. That happens at the level of the usual suspects, ICAO, IATA, WHO. Then we need to engage with those levels of government that the industry had very little engagement in the past. And I'm talking about subnational governments. And then third, I think we need to become leaders in bringing forward this data that government needs to make decisions. Now, at the end of the day, as you know, we've seen in Canada right now, the industry has provided a lot of data. There's a few testing protocols implemented at Vancouver Airport and the Toronto Airport as well, Montreal as well. And the idea has been to provide data to the government in terms of reliability, in terms of protocols as well. Mindful that, you know, governments at the end of the day, they will make the decision that will put them in a safe environment for the next election. I think we should never forget that. I mean, that's just the way things roll. But the more efforts we can do with subnational governments and being the #1 data providers, I think we can come up with intelligent and creative solutions that will not only help the current global mess that we have to recover, but also be more resilient for the next one, because we'll have all those things already in place. So that I'll stop there, and happy to engage in a further discussion with all of you.
Thank you, Marcelo. There was one question which came through, which was what do you actually mean by sub-national governments?
Well, for example, in federal government, in federations, you have states, you have provinces, right? Like, I'm just going to take the North American example here. Australia, I think it's another case. I think the European Union, even though it acts as a supranational entity, you've seen a lot of national governments that have been not necessarily agreeing with each other or coordinating with each other when it comes to travel restrictions and other protocols. Subnational governments, I mean, those governments, those levels of governments that are involved in health policy and health health services delivery. And oftentimes those governments are not in charge of foreign affairs, transportation, and military. So, for example, in the case of Canada, you have the federal government and you have provinces. And provinces, as per the Constitution, they have full jurisdiction on health. We've seen the case in the United States as well, where the previous president sort of refused to really manage the COVID-19 face-to-face. And so he had a bunch of states doing whatever they wanted, going in different directions. So that's what I mean, you know, this disconnection that there is between, let's say, the first entry point when you come from the international sphere into a country, and then all the other governments that are not necessarily national, but have a lot of influence in the direction of public health policy that ultimately affects aviation policy. I can give you Australia. I think it's another example. I think an example already, the European Union I gave you, even though we're not talking about subnational governments, but the national governments within the EU are sort of under the national structure. I mean, the Russian Federation, I think you have cases as well in Africa. So yeah, that's what I meant.
Thank you, Marcelo. And I think this is also a good reminder that this exercise, or our own time being spent on discussing this, will only be useful and helpful if we can, in a way, that's why I say this candid conversation about looking at ways and means where we can help things being managed better next time. Because the reality is there will be a next time. Even in this pandemic, there are new waves, there are new strains coming through, so and new information, and how we can, in a way, collectively help those who lead take the better decisions next time, and hopefully have a better impact next time. And this is, for me, how this becomes productive. It's not a matter of just pointing fingers or criticizing. It's a question of, okay, what do we learn from all this? And how can we as a sector help make things better next time? Fariba, please.
Uh, Hello, and so nice to see you, Vijay.
Same here, Fariba.
So I am Fariba Alamdari. I am a former vice president of marketing strategy at the Boeing company on the commercial side. I retired in 2019 before all these issues came about. First of all, fantastic conversation, and I personally very much like our focus on the future. We are facing right now a big challenge as an industry. And not only, as Vijay say, we want to have lesson learned for the next, God forbid, pandemic, but also we need to find ways how we can minimize the impact of this current crisis on the aviation industry. I believe that for the solution or influencing the way we go and hopefully shorten or minimize the impact, we have to follow simplicity. If we bring everything into the pot, sometimes it's such a huge task that we just get ourselves paralyzed. I think one way is that we look at best practices, not perfect practices. Right now, a lot of airlines, airports, countries, they are doing things. They are making use of university researchers, consultants. Let's find out what are the best practices right now and how we can build on it. And that's what we always done in the industry. Look at the low-cost airline business model, or CRS or frequent flyer programs and all these things. All this time we learned, we built, we modified, we made it better. And I think one way is to look at best practices. I traveled during this period, not a lot, but I can see airlines are doing things. And it may not be perfect, but they are moving, the airports are moving. So that's what I think. I just wanted to share my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Fariba. But I think that this notion of and I go back to Pierre's point about being future wise, is actually a powerful one to actually have, in a way, this conversation between very experienced and very passionate people about this sector, being helpful and useful. Anybody else would like to?
Can I say something? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Gisu Rosala from Honolulu. I just wanted to, as from the point of view as a passenger, being actually more involved in operation and sustainability and design and flow, I think my take would be in order to make passengers safer and more willing to really get on the planes and go on long distance flights, because short distances may be easier to handle, but the long distance is also probably also on a future demand as we had before. So I think I think I put it in a chat, looking into changing the seating options, kind of going back into, I think we are all still not familiar with the train and the cabins, yeah, kind of like that, to have enclosed areas for passenger groups, yeah. It's gonna be a little bit more work, I'm pretty sure, to service the passengers, but it makes it gives more a safer feeling as a passenger to be in a plane. And also it would be also helpful to create handouts, yeah, how the air conditioning works, yeah, how it makes gives it a more secure feeling to really get in the planes and feel that the passengers are taken care of. I think that would be my idea to bring into it's an entire different perspective, because I am not in aviation, yeah, but as a passenger and as someone who looks into sustainability and operations, yeah, that would be my idea to contribute to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Gisu. And I think it goes back to the point we made earlier about the need to think about the community this sector serves as well. And I think in terms of understanding how the world has changed. And clearly, sustainability is now way up front. And I think governments or airlines, which or tourism operators, which ignore the critical importance of sustainability, do so at their peril. So I think this is definitely an area where we need to encourage our sector to rethink its strategies and align itself to what the world now expects. Whatever has been done pre-COVID may need to be updated and upgraded in this new environment. Adel, please.
Yes, good morning, and thank you very much for giving me this chance to address this distinguished group of people. I just want to put a couple of remarks, and then I will shut off because I have a flight to catch. It is all about a collaborative effort from everybody. We cannot pinpoint that this is the issue, or it's solely related to airlines or governments or travel agents or tour operators. It's the entire industry all together to put their hands together and to work it out together. The main concern is the fear of people to travel. For instance, I'm traveling later today, I'm traveling, and I was hesitant to book an economy because of what was mentioned here about the middle seat, that it is not going to be secured 100%, that it will be empty. So I had to book a first class just for the peace of mind. The issue is that being an ex-deputy marketing director of the Jordan Tourism Board, when the pandemic started, I have been observing all of the destinations. They were highlighting the features of the destinations and the main attractions, and this is not what people wanted to see. They wanted to see what measures those destinations are doing to ensure the safety of the travelers. And this is, again, what airlines should be emphasizing on. I could clearly see, for instance, Emirates and Qatar Airways, without considering this promoting those airlines, but they are doing very good measures and highlighting what they're doing even at the airports, which boosts the confidence of the traveler. So the issue is that governments as well should be educated by international entities like IATA that air travel does not really contribute to that extent in increasing the pandemic. If we take Jordan, for instance, we closed the airports ever since the pandemic started. But when the airports was opened again, the number of cases that arrived from abroad was very, very minimum if you compare it with the spread of the social gatherings and the things that happened inside the destination itself. So I think building up the confidence is extremely important, because we have to take something into consideration. If we are not all, and all by means the world, safe, nobody will be safe. So until the vaccine will take its measures, will create this immunity, it will definitely take time. So until then, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, we have to find a way. And I think it's the role of the international organizations to educate the governments that this is the way we have to do it, so that everybody puts a specific protocol. Not every country puts a protocol out of its head, because it's a test and trial today. So I think it has to be organized in one way or another, that everybody abides to a certain protocol that would make the life of the traveler easier, whether it's a business traveler, whether it's a tourist, whether it's a student, whether whoever wants to take the flight and to travel through the airport, in the airline, whenever they embark, whenever they check in, etc. So it's an entire combination of different experiences that has to be put in line, so that everybody has the confidence to travel again.
Thank you very much, Adel. You clearly have the confidence to travel again, since you are taking a
Oh
flight
yes,
soon.
definitely.
So, but I think you raise an interesting point, which I think is and it goes back to the community discussion we had earlier, because governments are in a very unviable position of being pressed to somehow make a decision of balancing health and wealth.
Let me, if I may interrupt you in one
Please.
thing. Let's take our government, for instance, here in Jordan. The main concern was the capability, the health capabilities within the kingdom. So if the number of cases were too much and the health capacities in Jordan couldn't cope with it, then it would be a disaster. That's why they took very strict measures. If we look at other countries, whether in the States or Europe or elsewhere, their situation is very bad. There are certain states that they don't have beds in hospitals anymore. So that's why I think that governments sometimes they are forced to take certain strict measures so as to ease this spread of the pandemic.
Thank you, Adel.
Thank
Chris.
you, sir.
Thank you, Vijay. Good to see you after such a long while, and to see several other names of people, even I think 3 of us from Montreal I can see listed there. My name's Chris Lyle. I have very long experience in air transport with British Airways, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, ICAO, World Tourism Organization, and my own consultancy, Air Transport Economics. So one of the things I'd like to say is that I think at the moment we are going to see quite substantial changes in tourism post-pandemic. The people are thinking very hard, going back to grassroots and thinking about its retained revenue, what we're after. It's not mass tourism, it's not over tourism. So they're looking very seriously at that situation. At the same time, the aviation side seems to be sort of not thinking very hard and heading back towards what you might call business as usual, when in fact there needs to be some fairly radical rethinking. And one of the issues that I've found in the last 20 years is that they tend to operate in silos. And that is a real serious problem that the aviation and tourism sectors need to get together. Aviation, for example, there are going to be some very substantial challenges. For example, the issue of air carrier ownership and control, which is very restricted at the present time, because of the state of airlines and the difficulties they're having, is going to have to be changed. I'd like to mention just a few things that I'm working on too. One of the things somebody mentioned, we're going to have another one, something's going to come at some other time. I'm actually working with a group led by Paul Peters of Breda University in the Netherlands on a form of insurance and action on insurance to help prepare for next time around. I've also, and this is close to my heart, working on sustainability issues. Interesting enough, I gave a lecture last week to Jeffrey Lippman's climate friendly travel diploma, tourism diploma, which Jürgen will know well because I saw him discussing with Jeffrey a couple of days ago. And the title that Jeffrey gave me, which I thought was interesting, was Aviation Elephant in the Room. And that was because of climate change. It's fairly clear that climate change is going to be far more serious even than the pandemic, if I may say so, in the longer term. And you turn it around the other way. I'm working also with someone called Harold Goodwin in the Responsible Tourism Partnership of World Travel Market, WTM rather than N. And Harold, as you may have seen, refers to aviation as the Achilles heel of tourism. So I think the tourism and aviation sectors have to think hard about where to go from here. And we have actually working on routes forward, particularly on sustainable aviation fuels, which came up, I believe, a couple of nights ago in your discussion with Paul Steele, who was also involved in the Jeffrey Lippman exercise at one point. We believe that sustainable alternative fuels, power to liquid, hydrogen are ways to go, but we need to have a big push to push them forward. And in fact, we are working towards a presentation at the United Nations Framework Convention, COP26 in Glasgow at the end of the year, this year, along those lines. So I just wanted to, I have far more information if anyone wants it, but I just wanted to mention those things. I believe that the aviation tourism silo is important to think, and trade as well, of course, think together when we move forward, and also that we cannot forget the issue of climate change.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I think this is a critical point. And I think, whereas it is true that the airline industry has had a good record of improving its CO2 impact, there were some statistics that since 1990, for example, the industry has improved its CO2 impact per passenger by over 50%. But with COVID and this mass grounding of aircraft, CO2 emissions, according to the Global Carbon Project, has reduced by up to 60%. So I think the expectations are going to be much higher. And the question now is whether what was done by this industry, including its targets about carbon neutral growth and pathways to zero net emissions by 2060-65, CORSIA by ICAO, do these need to be in a way revisited and in the light of the new expectations regarding environment, or the impact of aviation on the environment? I think that it's an issue which I think cannot be shied away from, because as I said, the world has changed, and I think the good name of aviation must be safeguarded. And I think these discussions must take place very candidly, because as Chris said, you do not want a situation where finally even tourism kind of starts poking at aviation for making it look bad, because it does depend on aviation, especially from long-haul destinations. Thank you very much for that, Chris. And please do, if you can, share the links to any of those excellent works you have referred to in the chat group for our colleagues also to be able to dig further into those. Thank you very much.
And Chris, actually, if you send us the links, we can put it on the page for the aviation group. There is a page, just go to interest groups on WTN.travel, you find aviation, and then we can add as many post as we want to it. So that would be very useful.
Can I just add, of course, Vijay, you quoting the per passenger figure, but in fact, over that same period of time, aviation emissions have increased quite radically. And a recent study, a very important study by David Lee, Manchester University and so on, are saying it's not just CO2. They've now got a measure on even, it's just NOx and methane, but also contrails. So that's very important. And the other thing is that things are happening, particularly in Europe. You've got a number of airlines and airline groups now, IAG, for example, saying carbon net zero 2050. What we need to do is to try and get the whole world to say carbon net zero 2050, which is a very difficult thing to do. And it's one of the weaknesses of CORSIA, which has been made even weaker by a council decision in June to base the carbon neutral growth figure from 2019 rather than half of 2019 and 2020, which means it won't even start doing anything till 2026. And as you probably know, China has recently pulled out of that because they see, like many other people, that you need to go bottom up. The problem with ICAO is it's top down. That's the way it works. You have worldwide standards and you try and meet those standards. Whereas the reason why Copenhagen COP failed was because it was top down. The reason why Paris was successful was because it was bottom up. And allowing individual countries greater ambition, which ICAO does not allow, would be a good thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point, Chris. And I think these are the, let's say, the tough conversations which must be had, even more so today, because the communities are involved. Communities actually who have nothing to do with travel and tourism are involved because governments are being called upon to financially support this sector. And once you start getting into that realm, that's a matter of politics as well, which means that communities have more influence on governments than we can or organizations can. And then that's why you've seen, for example, many governments have been pressurized to link some kind of environmental targets to financial aids being given to some airlines, because they were being criticized for being asked, why were you supporting these airlines unconditionally? And even the issues of offsetting today is being criticized as, in a way, kicking the can down the road and not addressing in a more realistic way the impact issues. And I agree with Chris in terms of the impact now is not just limited to CO2, it's the whole environmental impact. And definitely the question remains whether the pre-COVID CORSIA, the pre-COVID commitments the aviation sector took are able to withstand the enhanced environmental challenges, or whether we need to update them in the light of these increasing calls to move beyond net zero and even help regenerate. I mean, these are new frontiers which we need to look into, whether in terms of sustainable biofuel, smart ATC, and in fact, our friends from the manufacturing sector stepping up in terms of what they can do to help achieve these much more challenging goals for our sector. And in that sense, I'd be grateful to hear, in fact, from Fariba, because she's had a history with the manufacturing sector, in terms of how you think what it takes or what it will take for the manufacturing sector to deliver some significant outcomes in terms of reducing aviation's impact on the environment. Looking at the track record they've had in the 10, 15, 20 years ago, what is in the offing, Fariba? If you can share.
obviously, manufacturers made great progress so far, but you know that we are all facing some challenges right now. And the focus is very much on that. One great way for manufacturers to reduce the impact of airplane on the environment being by bringing new airplane, new engines, and that's always been the value added. What this new airplane is going to do in terms of fuel efficiency and as a result, impact on the environment. So we know right now we are perfecting what we have already. So this is an ongoing process. It's not something that we have a hard sort of place to go and say, okay, we are fine. And you know that Boeing is been working very much with all type of organization, institution to look at biofuel, to look at alternative fuels, to look at everything possible, whether it is on actual airplane or its operation. And this will continue. But can I give you a number or can I give you a year?
Yes,
no,
please.
No, I don't. I know it would be nice.
Yeah. No, the reason I press you on that, Fariba, is because when the world is watching, we know that progress comes from research and development.
Absolutely.
Right. And research and development is dependent on finance.
Exactly.
And finance is dependent on a perceived need for that research and development. And while we're not seeing as much research and development in terms of transformational change of aircraft and engine manufacturing, is it a financial issue? Is it because people have not seen, society has not seen this as an urgent need? I mean, if you look at even COVID, vaccines were developed in record time because the community, governments, everybody realized this was important and research had to be done urgently. And I'm sure finance followed. So is it an issue that the need is not being perceived as critical in the aviation sector? Is it because our own targets have been so comfortable in some ways that it has not pushed everybody to the limits of current expertise and available resources? I mean, I'm asking this question to prompt a debate as to whether what more needs to be done, because aviation obviously had a history of breaking new grounds, in terms of even environmental impact, in terms of performance, in terms of distance, in terms of speed. What would it take to get all the minds to focus on, okay, how do we crack this environmental impact problem?
Well, Vijay, and I'm sure all our participants, they have huge experience in the aviation industry, that overall aviation industry done really well. I mean, we all remember that graph that where we were, 30, 40 years ago and where we are now. And it's not just the airplane, it's the operational side of the airplane. And a lot's been done in that area, whether it's from taxiing the airplane at the airport, the air traffic control. So the industry has come together to move towards a better performance. And you know better than me that, aviation is a very small part or very small contributor to CO2 issue and problems. So not because I work for Boeing and I want to defend, but I know for sure that while I was there, I could see we formed new group, we work closely with other organizations, whether they are researcher, air traffic control, airport, to make sure we are making progress. And our value proposition always been for a new airplane in terms of fuel efficiency. So, and you're asking what we can do to be faster. I think everything you said, I mean, there is no one cause, there is no one thing that can push. But I can put my hands on my heart and say that collectively we are doing better. Is it the best? It can never be the best, but it's not like sitting back and say, oh, there is no pressure. What do we need to do? And I'm happy to hear from other participants, but that's my view.
No, you make a good point, but I think that the reality is that we are under the microscope at the moment in terms of that element, because if you look at before COVID, aviation was one of the fastest growing sources of greenhouse gas emissions. The European Union even said that if global aviation was a country, it would rank in the top 10 for greenhouse gas emissions. And globally, aviation produced 2.4% of total CO2 emissions. But when you combine it, as Chris mentioned, with non-CO2 effects, the environmental impact is closer to 5%. But what was more worrying was the growth, because the airline industry was destined to grow at an incredible rate. And COVID has, in a way, stopped that. But my point is, can we not use COVID as an opportunity to get, in a way, on track to a faster delivery on more performing aircraft and engines when it comes to the environment, and also when it comes to fuel. This is obviously not one sector. It's not just the aircraft manufacturers. It will involve everybody who is connected. It involves fuel manufacturers, it involves fuel producers, it involves ATC providers, because that's also one area of significant waste when it comes to environmental impact. So I think it's a question of how do we make sure that all the stakeholders embrace this new challenge and take it to heart, like you have taken, Fariba. How do we ensure that the others also take this seriously? Because now, as I said, the stakeholders have been enlarged to not just passengers, and now we're talking about the whole community is involved in our sector, because the community is the industry has asked for help, financial help, which means the community also has now a voice, a bigger voice than ever before, and also the world has had a heightened sense of awareness about the environment and climate change challenges than perhaps ever before. And that's a positive which we must also try to leverage. If we need help, I think all our sectors should say it. We need more resources. We need more, government support.
It's collaboration. I mean, you said it. Is really collaboration. Is not, it's just not one party. It's collaboration, and it's finances. So it all comes together, and also innovation. I mean, look at the car industry. Now more and more people are driving battery-driven cars. So I think, innovation will come as it has done in the past. And I am maybe too optimistic, but I think it will be that way. We will see innovation, but I'll go back and say, it takes the whole village to come together and be determined to address this issue. It's not just one party, but every party should do their own part. But I think manufacturers are doing, can they do more? Yes, but have they been sitting back and say, no, life is good? Not at all. Not at all. Whether, as I said, look at fuel efficiency, look at the weight of airplane, working with ATC, working with airports. I think, they've been engaged and they can see there is an issue and they want to play a role in that. And that's my genuine opinion. I'm not, trying to
No,
be nice, but
I mean, it's a good
what I've
conversation
seen.
to have, because I think, and the question I asked to you and the group is the issue that we should, as a village, come together and set more ambitious targets in terms of
Yes,
the
but
budget.
again, we have to be careful not to put such a target that paralyzes the whole industry. Especially right now, they are in a really weak point. It's a matter of survival. I mean, we are seeing what is happening to airlines. We are seeing, load factors are, in the US, we're, domestic even, we are talking about 39, 35 to 40% international. So we have to have a holistic approach and have target that, yes, is, kind of demanding, but it's not too much that paralyze the whole industry.
Agreed, but are the current targets challenging enough? That's my question. Not to the point of paralyzing the sector, but to avoid the sector being paralyzed from taking action.
Good question. I'll be interested in other panel member
Chris,
to say.
what do you think? Are the current targets ambitious enough? Chris,
You're asking me specifically?
Yes.
No, they're not. They are not. I mean, IATA 50% reduction in CO2 2050 over 2005 is not enough. ICAO has been looking at developing a long-term goal since 2010. It's still looking at the feasibility of doing that. But, and I say but, I've already mentioned IAG. There's a number of other airlines that are actually really taking action in the United States, in Europe, who are saying, yes, it's going to be carbon net zero 2050, and we know how to get there. What we need to do is to get that hopefully developed into a broader framework and perhaps in a regulatory mode. And I think you will see it, well, you already see it in Europe. The European Union already has that as a target for aviation. And of course, we have, I know I shouldn't be perhaps taking the other side, but we've seen Airbus's proposal for hydrogen aircraft, which is quite impressive. There's some riders to it. You've got United Airlines in the United States saying they're going carbon zero by 2050, but using carbon capture and storage. So I think it's technically feasible, but we need to get the message out there that it's not good enough. We have children, we have grandchildren, and aviation's contribution is just getting a little too large.
Thank you very much, Chris. Doreen from Singapore.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Doreen. Thank you very much.
Oh, hi. Hi, Vijay and everyone. It seems to me as an ex-airline worker, there is a critical need to have airlines and passenger lobby groups work together, and any possible concerns by the latter on any draconian or impractical measures as they see it imposed on passengers that would deter enthusiasm in travel would be the starting point. And to form a working group might be the most practical position we could take to gently encourage them to do away with any impractical requirements of passengers for travel. I put it to you and everyone to contribute what they think about this.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Thank you for your suggestion as well. I think, as we discussed earlier, the fact that the whole travel and tourism sector is like open for debate in the community. People are taking an active role in looking at it. I think it's important for those who represent the sector recognize this fact and are not seen to be simply defending a sector, but in seen to be engaging with the community and addressing issues which perhaps we had shied away from addressing in the past. The credibility of our spokespeople is so important, because that's how you then have leverage to push back on some, let's say, unreasonable and impractical or ineffective measures, which seem to be popular, but actually are not helping anybody. But if the organizations themselves have not, in a way, improved their own credentials and credibility by engaging on discussions such as, for example, the environment, and you know, as Fariba said, highlight what has been achieved, highlight what more needs to be done, recognize that there's a challenge we need to all work together on. These kind of, if you want, recognitions of that we are not at our best. Let's put it this way: we're not at our best. There's more work to be done, and we can all work together. That's a different message than saying we're all fine, we're perfect, there's nothing to see here. That doesn't really generate the kind of trustworthiness which is so critical. And I think, yes, if this group can help with these debates, put together the kind of thoughts which would help those who represent the sector to, in a way, do a better job at ensuring that the sector is heard and is able to survive and thrive. But I think it's not by avoiding these tough discussions or not embracing them that we can do that. But I agree with you, Doreen. Perhaps a working group from this WTN Aviation's interest group could actually work and start working on this, because it's not just a matter of PR. It's not just a matter of it's a serious sector which actually has a critical role, and its importance cannot be undermined by its perceived inability to address issues which are of significance to the wider community now. And I think that's we have to wake up to. The community we engage with now is much wider than it was before COVID. And so I'm going to probably ask if there are more comments. I'll try to keep this on time so that we close in about 8 minutes. So if there are other thoughts and suggestions, comments, please. This is the idea here is we all experience in this sector, so we will not take any offense or any any criticism is welcome. Any new thinking, any thinking outside the box is particularly welcome.
Vijay,
yes,
I've written a lot of my thoughts on the in the chat section, but at least in over the last 20 years, there has been a ongoing attempts to get the airlines to interface proactively in the tourism industry. One of the big issues continues to be handicap accessibility, and handicap accessibility in toilets, not only in seating, but the actual online experience for the handicap. And I know the various agencies in New York and at the federal level as well have been trying over the years to get the airlines to do something to accommodate the handicap. And again, totally ignoring, instead of getting better, instead of accommodating people in wheelchairs or people with walkers or whatever it is, the toilets and the aisles and the seats become smaller and smaller and smaller and make it more and more difficult for the handicapped individual to have a decent, let alone comfortable airline experience. Seniors, military, ill people, it just goes on. And it's because the airline executives talk only to themselves. They refuse to have anybody give them any comments. The only time I was ever able as a reporter to get directly to an executive is if I've gone to one of the trade association meetings. They will not do it. They're not available for interviews. Their public relations people do not respond to their emails. They certainly don't respond to telephone calls. They have isolated and insulated themselves at the same way the cruise line industry has done it. And they've done it. They built the wall. They've built the Trump wall around themselves, and they do exactly what they want when they want it. They're not addressing the needs and wants of any segment of the consumer market. And until somebody has a way of drilling through this barricade, it's going to be same.
Thank you, Lenore. I think your point about, and I think this is something we've seen even when we were very engaged in industry. We tend to have conversations with peers. We tend to have discussions with colleagues and people who basically almost think along the same lines. But I think in this world we need to have more real conversations, more candid conversations, and that's why I basically wanted to give the name of Plain Talk to our first series of panel discussions, is to allow people to actually feel free to share their concerns, because see, concerns cannot be addressed unless and until they are expressed and heard.
But they are expressed. I mean, whether
heard. No, that's the point I'm making. They're expressed, but if they're not heard and responded to, then you create this spreading of a particular thought. And I think rather than ignoring challenges, let's embrace them. Let's every issue. There should be no issue which is taboo in a way that cannot be addressed and cannot be discussed in a very reasonable and frank way, where concerns are understood.
Look how badly they've treated the consumer just over this last year in trying to get their money back, when the airlines have canceled flights and people have been trying to get their money back. The airlines and the cruise lines have put up barriers and hurdles and dishonest and fake news, and have treated the passenger as though they were garbage. There is not one good thing that can be said about the airlines and their responsiveness or lack of responsiveness to the needs and wants of the consumer. It's their way or the highway.
Although to be fair, I know that the many airlines have also acted very responsibly and in a very consumer-friendly way. But you're right, there are many others which have not. The question is, how do we help everybody in a way up their game? And this is where I think this discussion can be helpful in terms of identifying ways and means where everybody can do a better job. I mean, that's the whole idea, is how do we keep improving? This has been unprecedented for everybody. And I think it's a point of how do we ensure that we do better, we keep doing better. And I think go back to Fariba's point, it's not a question of we are resting on our laurels and we invite everybody else to rest on their laurels, however great the laurels are and however comfortable they are. The reality is we have to keep moving forward, keep improving, and not just in one area, in all areas. And in many ways, we are now being challenged to up our game. And I think this is the message this group is sharing here, is that it's not just one area, every possible area, some of which have never been visited before, need to be visited or revisited to ensure that we keep showing a determination to improve endlessly. And that's the only way, to my mind, where we can be future wise, to go back to Pierre's point. Fariba, please.
And just, I'm repeating myself, but let's share the best practices. There are good, bad, and ugly organizations, and let's learn and build on that and move on. That's the only comment I wanted to add.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to have a final thought? Carla just joined us, so anybody wants to, and before I wrap up in the next 30 seconds or 1 minute, please. Rudolph?
Maybe I can say just some.
Please.
Hello, my name is Rudolf. I'm from WTN chapter in Malaysia. I just would like to say to a little bit of a wrap up also. We need sensibilization for sustainability, which is sanitation, distancing, cleanliness, and health. And it should be intersectoral in tourism, like in aviation, in air and on ground, hospitality, and other transportation. And I believe, strongly believe, holistic approaches are very crucial and essential. And inclusiveness is a must too. Like what Elena said, we also have to take care of the handicapped and any other people as well. So I think it's more than just aviation, but aviation is a one part which is very crucial. And from the aviation, we have to spread it to the other sectors of the tourism. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Rudolf. And I think your point is well taken in the sense that there's so much good this industry has brought and is still bringing and will continue to bring. So let's not throw the baby with the bad water. Let's deal with the bad water and ensure the baby grows up in a healthier and environmentally better shape. That is the challenge I think we should put to ourselves. How can we help everybody in the sector rise up to the new challenge of the new area, of the new era? So I'd like to really thank you and for having participated actively in this brainstorming session. Jürgen and I will discuss and debrief after this in terms of how do we take these discussions further in terms of our engagement. I think it's a fantastic group, and I'm grateful that you set aside 90 minutes to actually share your thoughts and engage in what I insist on is a brainstorming session. In a sense, I don't have any of the answers, and I think many of us are also looking for the answers. But I think the first purpose we have here to help us find the right answers is to first to ask the right questions. I think we can agree that this discussion has helped us in a way identify some new questions. And I'd like to also encourage you, in the light of how do we learn to do better next time, is to read the report of the WHO Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response, which was released last Tuesday. Because it is actually a very telling, although it's written in a very, I would say, diplomatic way, but it does contain, under all this diplomacy, some very telling statements. For example, I'll quote you three parts, which I think to us would be very helpful in helping us in our thinking. One was sufficient evidence exists to be confident that decisions to implement strict public health control measures will leave economies at least no worse off than those that do not implement these measures, while averting significantly more death and illnesses. There are critical feedback loops between epidemic control and economic activity. For example, there's evidence that unless people feel safe, they will be reluctant to re-engage in key economic and social activities such as schooling or commerce. And I could add here, air travel and tourism. Another quote, trade and travel restrictions, and I would urge you to listen to this one carefully and draw your own conclusions. Trade and travel restrictions have had a negative impact on the flow of essential commodities, but have most likely been helpful in curbing transmission. The perceived need to balance disease containment against the countervailing desire not to constrain trade and travel is as old at the history of quarantine itself. These are the issues really, dear friends, we need to embrace and discuss, because the reality is nobody knows how all this will play out. But we must all wake up and get everybody to wake up to the fact that the new normal requires new mindsets to find new solutions. There's an ever-growing need to create this safe, secure, and more socially, environmentally, and economically sustainable travel and tourism model, which is driven by values. On this note, I'd like to thank all and every one of you. Fariba, please. Unmute yourself.
Just saying goodbye. Thank you.
Oh,
very
yes. Okay. I thought you were raising your hand. So, okay.
No, sorry.
On this happy note, then, thank you very much to all and every one of you for your really candid and outspoken contributions. Very much appreciated. That's the spirit of this group. That's what we want to do, is bring candor to our discussions. And that, to me, is where we can be most helpful. Thank you very much. Until we meet next, please stay safe and well. Thank you and goodbye.
And thank you, everybody. If you needed to get a copy of this, it'll be on livestream.travel and also on the Aviation Group page on WTN.travel, probably within a few hours. We're also going to email everyone who registered. Those that are looking or watching us online and haven't been able to watch from the very beginning, it will repeat in the next 12 hours on the same screen you're on now, or otherwise go to livestream.travel. Again, very good discussion. Thank you, Vijay. Looking forward bringing this on to the next step. And I wanted to specifically thank you. I see so many on board in countries where it's like 3 or 4 in the morning. That's amazing. Thank you so much for being part of this group.
Thank you. And if you would take a few minutes after just to email either me or Jürgen your affiliation, that would help him in terms of the recording of this session, basically your current or former affiliation in terms of for our record. That would be very helpful. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Okay, good night. Aloha. Bye-bye.
Beaches is all about families, and keeping your family safe is our #1 priority. That's why we created our Platinum Protocol of Cleanliness, setting a new standard of excellence in health and safety protocols to give you a worry-free destination wedding of a lifetime. Beaches was built on connection. Connecting with family and friends, celebrating old times, and creating new beginnings. And we know the love you have for your family and having them there for the most special time of your life is what's most important. At Beaches, you can still have that happily ever after with a fully customized destination wedding surrounded by the people who mean the most to you. You can feel safe saying "I do" on a lush tropical garden, or walking down a white sand aisle with a calm blue sea as your backdrop. Our wedding venues are found in wide open spaces, nature-made for celebrating your love. And while we've always led the industry in health and safety protocols, our resorts are even safer now than ever, giving you a wedding free of worries, surrounded by love. That's why we've reduced the capacity of our venues and put more physical distance between guests. Instead of tables for 8 at your reception, we'll seat only 6 guests per table. We've eliminated buffets and specialty food stations, so all food will be plated and served by Beaches staff wearing masks. We're even offering live stream service of your wedding ceremony, so your friends and family who can't travel right now can still share in your special day. Once the vows have been exchanged, the honeymoon of a lifetime begins. And we're taking every measure necessary to ensure your health and safety during your stay at Beaches. As part of the Sandals Resorts family, we've followed in their footsteps in setting a new standard of excellence with our Platinum Protocol of Cleanliness. Together with the extensive research from local ministries and health officials, the Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization, Beaches has instituted advanced hygiene practices across 18 key touchpoints. A triple check system that includes inspecting, cleaning, and sanitizing hard surfaces and common areas every 20 minutes. Adding auto-dispensing hand sanitizing stations throughout the resort. To ensure the utmost safety, Beaches will be using hospital-grade disinfectants, electrostatic sprayers for advanced cleaning, UV lighting equipment to inspect cleanliness, and air duct sanitization for each room before every guest's arrival. We've gone so far as to steam clean and sanitize carpeting and flooring prior to arrivals, and placing personal hand sanitizers in every guest room. For added safety, all staff members are required to wear protective face gear at all times. And from now on, guests can check in online at home, so they can bypass the front desk and go directly to their rooms. Stricter physical distancing protocols have also been put in place in every part of the resort. Chlorine and pH levels at all our pools and water parks are monitored every 2 hours. And we've taken added measures to protect the health and safety of your family. Our kids' camps facilities are sanitized before and after each use. And all of our professional nannies carry pocket-sized bottles of hand sanitizer. Our tween and teen hangouts, including the Xbox Play Lounge and Trench Town, are sanitized before and after each use with hospital-grade disinfectants. In addition, all our spa facilities and sports equipment will be sanitized before and after use to protect the health and safety of our guests and their families. Both Sandals and Beaches are committed to providing strict compliance and implementation of these safety protocols. So much so that we've created a dedicated quality inspection team at each resort to make sure all safety measures are adhered to. We can't wait to help you make your dreams come true with a destination wedding at Beaches. And while you're focused on your new life together, surrounded by those you love the most, we'll take care of everything else.